With that, I'm going to shut up, Dennis, and give your colleagues a chance to ask what's on your mind. Yes.
Yeah, Dennis, if you're sorry, I just wanted to say to everybody here before I ask my question, I hope that everybody here recognizes a glaring absence. Bob McDonald chose not to send somebody or even show up to this meeting.
Who?
I talked to his campaign manager, who's supposed to know Virginia politics, which scares me for this fall, next year. Didn't even know who VCDL was about the meeting. So I hope you all get on the blogs and on the internet, tell our friends to get in touch with Bob McDonald, tell him to wake up, because he's got some bad record to make up for. He's voted for one gun a month, voted to ban self-defense shotguns in Virginia. Dave, I want to ask you a question though. I don't need a background check right now to carry this firearm openly. Why do I need a background check when I do this? And VCDL's had a position, and the legislation's been put in Virginia to go to what they call an Alaska-style system, where you can get the permit if you want, because you want to travel interstate until we can straighten out the other states. Or if you choose not to get the permit, you can either carry a gun under the coat or outside the coat, and you don't need a background check, you don't need government approving you. What's your position on that concept?
Well, I want to know a lot more about Alaska because it's in the minority. To be candid, as you know, most states have the opposite rule. It has to do with the fear that the concealed weapon is more dangerous, at least in the wrong hands, and that open and notorious use of a firearm is less dangerous. Now that may or may not be right, but as a conservative, I don't overturn rules lightly. I give the status quo the benefit of the doubt until I've examined all the arguments and decided the status quo ought to change. But I'm open to looking at that, no pun intended, because I did not know until you told me that Alaska and there's one other state, New Hampshire, I believe.
Vermont has since it's been a state. It's always been that way in Vermont.
Thank you.
The law's written as long as you're not using the firearm for bad intentions, you can legally carry it.
Yeah.
Just to correct you, Alaska's law is not as great as Vermont. You want to go way, you want to go Vermont, not Alaska.
So, Dennis, that's where I am on that. And it's not where you want me to be, but I'm open to looking at it. And I would like to know, this is a lawyer speaking, but I'm going to be your lawyer if I win. I'd like to know experience in Alaska and Vermont, among other things. I'd like to know the law enforcement community's thoughts, the locality's thoughts before I make a decision. Let me mention one other thing. Because I'm not running to be a legislator or a governor or a lieutenant governor, I'm running to be your top attorney. We all need to be careful about how much we say in advance of taking the office, because of what Mr. Brownlee alluded to. He felt so strongly about the campus issue that he might have to go out and hire separate counsel. Well, if we all go out and hire separate counsel because we've stated strong opinions before they come to us to be resolved, and we feel conflicted, or the enemy says we're conflicted out and we can't rule on it, we're going to break the state budget all over again. A lawyer needs to keep an open mind about things that may come to him for legal opinion, and that's part of my caution about some of these issues too. But on top of all that, I'm not evading your question. I'm not convinced yet we ought to repeal that. I'd be glad to look at experience elsewhere. Yes, sir.
However, that said, there are issues of constitutionality, and whether you look at them one way or the other, things are either constitutionally right or wrong. And I will let Richard rephrase his question to you to refresh your memory if you need to.
Yeah, I would just ask the same question that Mr. Brownlee, and that is, if a lawsuit was filed challenging the authority of universities to prohibit people with permits from carrying, would you defend that?
First, I would have to decide whether the university had the legal authority to do that. If I felt, as the state's counsel, that the university exceeded its legal authority, I would have to so advise the university. Now, it has its own counsel, actually, the report to the Attorney General. It could defend itself. But if I felt that it exceeded authority, I'd have to do that.
Well, how do you feel? I mean, this issue has been out there quite a bit.
No, I do not have, whether it exceeds its authority.
Yes.
Me?
Yes.
No, I do not have an opinion on that.
You've not thought about this at all? I mean, it's been in the news for more than a couple of years now.
No, I have not thought about it, but I don't have a legal opinion, and I could be asked that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you mentioned taking the advice and counsel, if you will, of, let's say, for instance, the law enforcement community. But historically, what has happened relative to Second Amendment rights is that the upper echelon of police chiefs and sheriff's associations are, quite frankly, political forces, and therefore are on the other side of the table as most of the folks in this room. Specifically, rank and file police officers are with us. If you talk to associations of police chiefs and those kinds of folks, they historically are gun grabbers, for lack of a better term. One would only have to ask the police chief of Washington, D.C. right now. We see her on the news every other night. She'll snatch every gun she can get her hands on. So as the Attorney General, those are the folks that you're going to be rubbing elbows with. If you take too much credence in the advice and counsel you get from those kinds of folks, quite frankly, you're working on bad advice. I would suggest that you might want to talk to folks more in the line with the guys in this room than the police chiefs.
You make an excellent point. You really do. And DC is a perfect example of it, that handgun ban. And by the way, they also turned over a ban on trigger lock safeties. That was all endorsed by the top line of authority in the police department. When I was on the school board, actually, I felt the same thing, because obviously school safety was one of the things we worried about a lot. But when I wanted to know what we should do about it, I didn't go sit down with the police chief in Arlington, partly because he considered me a political enemy. But I went and talked to, because I was supported by and knew a lot of line officers. And God bless them, many of them, wore my bumper sticker and took some risks to do it. I went and talked to them about it. And they, by the way, are the reason we did some of the things we did when I was chairman that had to do with school safety. But would you believe we didn't even have big numbers over the doors after 9/11? So that when we needed to have a quick first response to any kind of trouble, first responders, including police, could tell where to go in the building and communicate with people inside. They didn't even have that. And the bureaucracy in the school system fought it. But it was line officers in the Arlington Police that helped convince me you should do that.
Time for one quick question. In blue shirt, you got your hand up there.
There's a question I asked earlier.
Yeah, we have
Someone
fingerprinting.
who is in Arlington. I live in Arlington. I do not have a concealed carry permit because I am not willing to submit to a fingerprint test. Do you believe a locality in Virginia has the right to require fingerprint tests for a concealed carry permit?
You got two questions there, really. And I'm gonna defer on the first one because I might be asked about the right under the Dillon rule to do that. And I think that's a very debatable proposition. Maybe you'll consider that encouraging. But the second question is whether that should be the rule. Well, I didn't answer your survey on that. I do tend to agree with you because I don't see what fingerprinting adds to all the rigmarole you go through to get a concealed permit. The long day of instruction, the meeting with the police, the deep background check. I don't see what fingerprinting adds to that. I really don't. I just would want to ask its advocates before I made a final decision. And also, there's this third question, really, of who decides at Richmond or the locality. I often think power should not be in Washington, but in Richmond, and not in Richmond, but in the locality, and that's an issue too. But on the merits of it, I got to admit, I don't see what fingerprinting adds to folks, law-abiding citizens who have gone through the concealed weapon permit process. And any police, you got back to line officers, and I think the top brass would agree too, will tell you, we don't worry about concealed permit holders. Those are the safest people going, because they went through all this. They're the law-abiding citizens that we don't worry about. So I'm sympathetic to your point.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.